Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ranjana Kushwaha, Policy Research Associate at Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics. I welcome you all to our panel discussion as we join together to discuss the governance and policy landscape surrounding artificial intelligence. I extend a warm welcome to each of you for joining us today in the panel discussion titled Depths of Deepfake, Its Impact on Society and Responses from Stakeholders. This panel discussion is part of Emerging Technologies and AI, Governance and Policy Landscape initiative of IGPP. Our primary goal of this initiative is to actively participate in the evolution of AI regulation, contributing to the creation of robust, adaptable, and organic regulation that ensures effectiveness and sustainability. By doing so, we aim to assist Indian lawmakers in navigating this transformative shift in AI landscape. For this, we'll employ a multifaceted approach, focusing on awareness, collaboration, and innovation, with the insights from various stakeholders, lawmakers, industry experts, researchers, and social scientists. Today, we are here to discuss an issue that has come at the center of many controversies, the use of deepfakes. In recent years, the rise in deepfake technology has ushered in a new era of deception, blurring the lines between reality and fiction, from manipulated videos of public figures and celebrities to doctored videos of politicians during the elections. The implications of deepfakes are far-reaching. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while addressing journalists on 17th November, raised concerns about the deepfake technology and its potential. He referred to one of his own deepfake video. PM Modi called misuse of technology worrying. He said, the effect of fast-changing technological landscape has touched upon existing system. Due to artificial intelligence, and especially because of deepfake, a new crisis has emerged. A significant section of Bharat is such that it does not have the means necessary for verification or to authenticate. People can fall prey to believing what they see to be true. And this will lead us towards a major crisis. All these series of issues compelled the government of India to take stern measures against the menace of deepfake. Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav, Cabinet Minister of Electronics and Information Technology, announced that government will bring in rules on deepfakes in few days. All of this serves as stark reminder of the alarming authenticity that deepfake technology has achieved. Now it is pertinent to talk about the dangers of synthetic media and deepfakes, its impact on society, and understand different stakeholders' perspective. So today we have with us Dr. Jyoti Joshi, an AI scientist, founder of Kurup AI, a deep tech startup working in the space of automatic facial and voice animation. Kurup AI also detects and analyzes deepfakes in detail across different platforms and information mediums. Welcome, Dr. Jyoti. We also have with us Ms. Ranjana Adhikari, partner in this law. She is an advocate who specializes in technology, media, and entertainment, including gaming and intellectual property. Ms. Ranjana is recognized as a leading lawyer in the Chambers of Partners Global Guide, Gaming and Gambling since 2019, and Asia Pacific Guide, Gaming and Gambling since 2019. She has won multiple awards for her contribution to Indian gaming laws. Welcome, Ms. Ranjana. The session is being moderated by Dr. Manish Tiwari, Director of IGPP and co-founder of Ranga, a digital parenting app. A sociologist by training, he is using tool of artificial intelligence and machine learning to solve modern technological problems of parenting. Once again, I welcome you all to this panel discussion. Now, I would like to hand over discussion to Dr. Manish Tiwari for further proceedings.
Thank you, Ranjana. I welcome Dr. Jyoti, Ranjana Adhikari ji, both of you. And I would like to begin with Dr. Joshi. I want you to kind of, let our audience know a little more about technically like what deep fakes are and how it is like different from what we call as like very simple fake videos. Is it like what are similarities, what are the difference, what are the at technical level, what are the kind of complexities of deep fake that it has become such an issue that prime minister has to speak about it and the government is saying that within 15 days we would make a rule. Why like it is like I would come more about it to Ranjana ji later, but first I want to understand from you, Dr. Jyoti, for our audience, like what exactly are deep fakes?
Ji. So deepfakes are generated or using AI generated content. It can be audio, it can be video or image-based content where someone is implicated or made to do or say something that they have not done in real. Now, how is it different from fake content? Because it's the earlier menace of fake news or fake media that we had, it wasn't convincing enough, or there were no proofs for it. But now, with the quick adoption of AI or how AI has progressed over the years, we are seeing a lot of video content that is very difficult for human eye to differentiate from being real or fake. And where technology now, using technology, there are different ways to actually create these deep fakes. So starting with, I'll just give you a few examples. One very easy way to create deep fakes are using face swapping. And these are the examples that we saw with the commonly shared deepfake videos of Bollywood celebrity that we have been seeing doing rounds on social media. So that's a classic example of face swapping, where an actor who actually was in the video, on top of it, a face swapped. Another way to use or create deepfakes is that facial performance transfer can happen. So essentially, the actual person who is in the video is going to remain same, but different expressions from a source can be transferred onto the target video. So it may look like they are making some expressions or they're actually saying certain things that they have not said in real. So the lip movement is actually going to look very much matching to the newer audio that could be synthetically generated or an audio clipping from somewhere else. And it may look like they're actually saying those things. So now the technology has come this far that it has become very difficult to differentiate, just looking at it, whether it is synthetically generated or it's actually real. And that's why this has become a really big and challenging problem, because we are consuming a lot of media and we are basing our perception based on what we are consuming. So that is why it is alarming now to differentiate, so that there is some measure to authenticate what we are seeing is real or fake.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I think I would bring my next question to you only once again. Like you have said in the last, like it becomes very difficult to differentiate between what is fake and what is real. How much I would say, like, creating deep fakes has become easy, but has the technology of making the difference between the two, what is fake, what is not, is it as easy technologically, or does it require really more evolution of technology?
Very good question. So I think so far, creating cheap fakes has become very easy, where you can see, you can make a celebrity into an animated face and make them do some funny moves, which was more like meme creation and for entertainment purposes. But it is very easy to figure out that these are fake videos, and it's not really doing much harm. Now, the question that you've asked, that has it become really easy to create high quality videos? To some extent, yes, with some of the open source tools available and with a lot of data that is available, which of, let's say, high profile individuals, that can be sourced and can be used for training. So when I have the data to train more and more and get more refined results, that can help me achieve high quality of deepfakes.
what I asked is like definitely the quality of creating deepfakes is definitely the quality is getting better. The sources are like more open and people can do it more easy. Like you can do it probably on your phone with the help of the AI.
Yes.
Say as simple as some chat GPT kind of thing. I'm asking, is the technology for detection of it, is it as simple? Or is it like, the technology would really take a little more time to evolve there?
No. So there's always a catch-up game, but I wouldn't say the technology has to really has to build from scratch. There are already some tools in the market, and we also are one of them who provides the tool for deepfake detection. And actually, I invite you to have a look at this. It's at deepfake.group.ai, where you can upload your media, video or an image, and then we can tell you whether it's synthetic or real. So now what's happening in the back end is, so I'll just explain you technically also, that there are certain artifacts that are left when synthetic media is generated. It could be as simple as, difference in eye colors, or the facial contours could be blurred, or there could be illumination changes in the faces. But these are very noticeable changes when we are actually watching a video. But when we actually process it frame by frame, and all the temporal analysis is done, we can pick up on those artifacts. And that's how we are able to tell that this is where the manipulation has happened, and this is where one should focus at. So we already have tools in place that can help detect the deepfakes.
Ms. Sanjana Adhikari, I want to come to you particularly towards the law side of it. We now know what deepfakes are and what technologies are available. So according to the Union Minister, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, he says internet safety and the prevention of deepfake circulation would fall under the responsibility of the social media platforms or any of the platforms which are there technically. How does this approach align with existing regulatory frameworks in India? That is the first part. And second, to know more about it, would you shed a little more light on what exactly is there in India as per law? If somebody is creating a fake video of me, then can I go and register the FIR? What exactly is for a common man? What exactly is there in terms of rules and laws?
Actually, I found the first part of the discussion so informative for me as well. So thank you so much, Jyoti, for some of those pointers you made. And you're so right in saying that there's always a level of catch up. And that's very true to the question that you have posed to me as well as, on the legal side as well. I think there is a certain degree of catch up while the law tries to be nimble and agile. As of now, the law is probably still playing catch up. So, very interestingly, earlier, um, just on a lighter note, the Merriam-Webster has fittingly crowned authentic as the 2023 word. And as ironical as this might be, a simple phrase like that has certainly become extremely complex in the day and age of deepfakes, as Jyoti so correctly articulated. Now, when I'm going to articulate about what the current framework is, I'd like to make a distinction between when we're discussing about deepfakes, which is really about use cases which might have a more malified intent sort of connected to it, in terms of using it for things like pornography or spreading disinformation, or affecting electoral opinions, and basically that genre which is more intended for some ill or malice. And then you have the category of digital replicas, which also have certain positive use cases, particularly for industries like media, entertainment, etc. So when we're talking about the law, we'll keep the two things separate. I know the question is more for deepfakes, so we will, sort of focus on that for the time being. In terms of the current law as such, as I think Ranjana said right at the beginning, METI has been very, very fervent in saying that they're going to take a four-pronged approach in terms of detection, prevention, reporting, and awareness. And while the government itself is split whether the current law is robust or not and whether they need future regulation, I think suffice to say there are certain regulatory provisions which already exist, and some of them, and rather a large part of them, are in relation to social media platforms. So, as many of us may be aware, we had the IT Rules 2021, which essentially sit under the Information Technology Act. And there are some relevant provisions to curb the spread of AI generated deepfake videos, primarily from the perspective of misinformation and impersonation. So there are provisions in relation to misinformation and impersonation, and those kind of use cases definitely get covered under these rules. Particularly, there are rules 3(1)(b), which have provisions for obligations on the intermediaries itself and these social media platforms, where they necessarily need to inform the users not to upload or disseminate any information. And certain amendments have also been recommended and brought in, which stipulate that these social media intermediaries must take down such content, especially which is in the nature of impersonation, like artificially morphed images of an individual within 24 hours of receipt of any sort of a complaint. There are also other provisions under the law, under the Information Technology Act itself, which deal with cheating by way of impersonation. So some of the cases that Jyoti mentioned about celebrities and their images being impersonated would certainly be a use and a fit case for the provisions under this. Even under our penal code, the criminal code that we have called as the Indian Penal Code, there are relevant provisions ranging from defamation, which largely fits around impersonation and use cases like that. There are provisions with respect to public mischief. There are also provisions in relation to voyeurism. But the unfortunate bit is that, the law is certainly archaic in its nature, and while it's agnostic to technology in terms of its implementation, all the nuances that today AI and deepfakes pose, there is a very limited scope that can fall within these provisions that exist. So, unfortunately, fortunately, while there are certain provisions that the erstwhile law and the current law already encompass, unfortunately, the nuances that deepfakes pose may not really be a fit case to fairly squarely fit within the realms of what these provisions are, which is where there are certain challenges. But having said that, I think fair to say that today, yes, I mean, you said from a layman's perspective, um, making complaints to the social media platforms, and there are sufficient, notices provided on their platforms as well, where you're able to report such content. So the social media platforms have been fairly active in taking down any kind of content, even under the current law, which would be affecting it. So deepfakes is just a nuance to it. And that is something that any common man can certainly explore because it's something documented under law. Now, the government has put a lot of emphasis on not just a reactive approach by the social media intermediaries, but also a proactive approach in a way, in terms of taking down such kind of content. While maybe the current law might be a bit contradictory in certain ways, because on one hand, we have the freedom of internet, and there are safe harbors built for these platforms. On the other hand, the government's expectation is to make a proactive approach. So there is that bit of dilemma under law, but keeping that aside, certainly a common man can reach out to social media platforms. Other than that, like I mentioned, because the Indian Penal Code already provides, at least for certain use cases like any kind of pornographic material put out, or voyeuristic content put out, or impersonation under the IT Act itself, you can certainly file an FIR, and channelize that sort of criminal mechanism as well as a first stop for a common man. I'll take a pause here, and I'll let you maybe ask me anything further you may have on this.
Yeah. No, so I just want to kind of break down what you have told me in two further parts. One is like definitely there are these kind of provisions at social media platforms and within the government which exist. That is one part. So there is like, how to make it more accessible, more easy to use kind of thing, and how it should, because, using the social media platform is everybody's thing. Like, starting from a small village in any part of, say, Jharkhand or Rajasthan or Andhra Pradesh, people sitting in Delhi or Mumbai can use it with the same ease because the connectivity is so. But it is not as easy for everyone to approach the authorities, to approach the platforms also, and even like, not just platforms, but the legal authorities. So that is one part. Like, is there anything which the government is thinking around it? That is one. Second thing is, when the government has said that, the minister said we would make a law in 15 days. Like, what is there which is not there in law that you need the law in 15 days? What we want to know more of that also.
Certainly. I think there's a little bit of crystal ball gazing that we'll need to do on these upcoming regulations, Manishji. I think it's very, wishful thinking to say that there'll be a law in place in 15 days when the government, in many conversations, the ministers seem divided also in terms of the approach, really. One school of thought is that there should be a new law in place and new regulations in place, whereas another set of ministers believe that, the current law itself is sufficient enough to take care of what exists. But truth be said, and looking at this from, a very analyzing it from a very third party neutral perspective, and probably as a part of the citizen group, which is likely to face these kind of issues in real time, I feel that while certain provisions might exist under law, some of them may lack teeth. Some of them may lack the capacity to capture the nuance that this deep fake is posing. Like I gave you an example of, voyeurism as a part of IPC, where it's an archaic law, and the way it is worded may not be sufficient to encompass something in the nature of deepfake, while the intent might be there, to encompass something like that. So certainly there is a gap between the current law. Also, a lot of the provisions that some of the ministers have vocalized regarding the IT rules 2021 themselves are in question to a large extent in terms of whether they are truly implementable, whether they are constitutionally fit to be implemented under the IT Act itself. There are a lot of questions on its constitutionality to begin with. Now, in that kind of a framework, trying to address these real world today's issues of technology, which are very, very serious, I believe, as compared to some of the other issues that might be plaguing the Métis. I think in this scenario, trying to rely on a law which in itself is questionable, to begin with, can pose a bigger problem. Which is why let's talk about what we believe should the upcoming regulations really have. I think suffice to say, four important things need to be in this. One is the law needs to discourage dissemination, which to some extent, which is already there under the law. It needs to incentivize early reporting. It needs to have a balance between allowing freedom of the internet for intermediaries, respecting their safe harbor, while at the same time helping them come up with frameworks which are practical to implement to take care of the issue at hand, which I believe is an iterative process in itself and is going to take some time. While the intent is there, and different companies have already started to internalize some of these issues and sort of, put together things, this is certainly going to take some amount of time. And number four, and an important one, and I don't know if it's going to have an impact on innovation in itself, is restrict the kind of avenues for creation of deepfakes. And the regulation needs to really have a very principle-based approach rather than a prescriptive approach to this. I can make a few, similes from what other countries have done, which could possibly be relevant for us as well. I think one thing is, while we do have certain, for example, fact-checking networks or cybersecurity requirements, I believe the current law may be anyways short of it. the need of it has already been recognized, which is why the government has very vocalized that the Digital India Act will come up with more stringent cybersecurity norms in place to counter any kind of disinformation threats. So I believe that while certain principles are there under the current law, the future law, while not as much prescriptive, is certainly going to be more stringent in terms of its approach, in terms of fact checking and cybersecurity norms. I think another constructive aspect that India can certainly learn from deepfake laws of other countries could be consent requirements. Now, definitely the Data Protection Bill, the Data Protection Act now has taken care of some of those requirements, and it's a very similar approach to what EU has done. They don't have a separate deepfake law, but it's a very consent-based mechanism there, including for such kind of situations, and with a guidance-based approach for AI usage, speaking to the GDPR as such. So that consent-based requirement, while there, I think we're in a more nascent stage, and it has to be an iterative process again. Some countries also have this mandatory labeling process. In fact, in a bid to tighten the norms to tackle deepfakes, Google has also recently announced that its content creators need to on YouTube disclose what is altered, what is synthetic, and this is something which is already stemming from certain laws of other countries. So these are some of the best practices that can certainly be there. Accountability of platforms, Mate is already vocalized that. So I do believe that we're going to see maybe a departation from the current way in which safe harbor has been built in, more stringent due diligence where there's going to be a more proactive involvement, more tools to be implemented by social media entities to enhance their accountability. And that is a theme that they have said not just for deepfakes, but just disinformation in general. So I do believe that the regulations are going to account for this. And I do believe that proportional penalties, now this is something, needs to specifically be enhanced to act as a deterrent to those who are creating the menace. Today, one could say maybe the Data Protection Act has certainly brought in more enhanced penalties, but because the law is still underway, we still to see how it will be implemented. I think these regulations or the future law on deepfakes need to take into account specific criminal and civil penalties into account. So these are certainly some of the things that I do anticipate coming in. I'd love to touch upon some of the more positive things that the law could look at, because he's spoken a lot about deep fakes. But I'll take a pause, and if you have anything to ask of me on digital replicas,
No,
I'll be happy to add that.
I actually have a lot to ask and to bring in again from what you have said, because
Sure.
you were in a flow. I did not want to disturb you because
No problem.
sometimes a lot of things. Because I would like to touch upon a few of those things again,
Sure.
because I want them as a response to an answer so that we can run it better.
Sure.
Anyway, Ms. Joshi, you were raising hand. You were saying something when Mr. Dikari started.
Yes, so I think Ranjana has really nicely articulated all the different things that we anticipate that should be there in the regulations to curb the menace of deepfakes. I just wanted to expand a little more on the third point out of four that you listed, where we should be seeing some frameworks at the social media ends, where some sort of tagging can happen at different stages. It could be as beginning at when the upload of a media happens, that before the media is actually uploaded and it's made public, it's tagged with a tag of synthetic media is attached to it. So whenever someone is viewing it, they are aware that they're watching something which is synthetically generated. So that kind of really takes down the probability of something going viral when we already are seeing that this is something synthetically generated. Then it doesn't really affect or there would not be much of the circulation of that sort of media. And I believe that's where defect detection sort of tools come in handy. And that could be stage one, but also they can look at it that when something is going viral, before they take it down or before it is being reported, if something really has gone viral, then they do run a test on it. And if it's deep fake or synthetically generated or manipulated, then the tag gets attached to it. So that could be one way of looking at that, how we can decrease the impact of any sort of reputation that can get damaged with it.
I agree what you are saying, Dr. Joshi. What exactly, particularly around a framework for the social media platforms, there should be something that when a content is getting uploaded, there should be some measures to kind of, it is authentic and all. But then comes the question of full artistic freedom, freedom of internet, all kind of issues they come in. So that I agree. But what I want to bring to your notice, both of you, and I want you both to discuss it, Ranjanaji, you said that, impact of law innovation. Now, this is one thing which I think Dr. Jyoti Joshi and you can discuss better, because, I would say, okay, stop this particular thing, or maybe around data, collection of data, use of data. But a company would say, I need data, otherwise how would I train my models? Now, this is a kind of, it's a catch. If you don't have data, a free data, maybe easy data, then you cannot really develop a lot of models. So what would be the impact of these laws on innovation particularly? So big companies might pay for data, but smaller couldn't, they cannot. How do you think, this particular thing would be, because if it gets into the law, then how would it be for technological companies? It would be detriment.
So it really depends the sort of regulations which are going to be rolled out. As long as, so for example, we are creating this detector, and also Ranjana, we are in the ethical synthetic data generation, because deepfake has a really negative connotation to it. So we've started to call it a different thing, though it's sort of using the similar technology, and we are in that space as well. So, and that is very much consent driven. So whatever replicas we are generating, whether it's of CXOs or Bollywood celebrities, with due consent, that happens, and that's where we get the data from these individuals themselves, so that their digital replicas or clones can be created. And as long as the other sort of new avatars or new clones are concerned, that is also followed by the similar thing. So as long as the consent is there, then I think we are covered with the rules as well, that we can use the data and train it.
So, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. I think a consent-based approach is probably what we have today. But I think to Manishji's point in terms of how do we see, and especially an economy like India, which is so heavily startup driven, where a lot of the tech companies are going to be startup driven. If we do, what are we anticipating really under this law, which could have an impact on them, both business, user interface, monetarily? I think, Manishi, there's no straight answer to it, because I don't think anyone knows how the government wants to approach it to begin with. But what I can see is a few of the similes, and how some of the newer policies, in terms of just content filtration, maybe not in relation to deepfakes, but newer policies that they have come up with, how has that impacted businesses? Now, I'll take a very simple example of how the online gaming industry was recently impacted by the government's new policies. Same law, IT Rules 2021, under which they brought in a framework. I think before the framework, the requirement was certainly to just be compliant with applicable laws. But when the government began to feel that there is a need for monitoring, but a light touch approach, what they introduced was, while a principle based approach, a prescriptive approach with respect to self regulatory bodies, which essentially, in short, requires you to take every piece of content and have it checked and verified. Now, the first and immediate impact that this is going to have is a cost element built in. Now, in any other regulation where there's a licensing framework, you would have had license fee costs. While there's no license fee cost here, there certainly is a cost, and there's a timeline attached to it. Everyone knows where speed is a very critical element where innovation is concerned, the first mover advantage. So if you ask me, what could the negative impact be? I do see that the startups could be saddled with some of these excessive processes, some of these excessive tools being built in, and depending on who is the stakeholder in the ecosystem. We spoke extensively about the, social media intermediaries. But where deepfakes are concerned, there are so many other stakeholders in the entire ecosystem, right? And we don't know what is the final regulation going to talk about. There could certainly be a cost impact, and thereby perhaps some of the startups may not survive, in terms of scaling up their business. Scaling up the business, like you correctly said at one junction, Manishi, that without data, how do you enhance your business, right? So again, scaling up business from a business perspective could also be a challenge, is what I anticipate under this law, given the amount of monitoring that would be there on the content and the volumes of content. So certainly something that we've recently seen in under the same IT rules 2021 as an impact. To begin with, I do see that as a challenge. The good part of it is, and I must commend METI for this, to a large extent, while other ministries like TRI or other other ministerial bodies like TRI, etc., have tried to impose on some of these technology industries a more stringent prescriptive licensing framework. They have tried to bring it to a regulation which is more principle based. So at least some of the more harmful impacts on innovation that could have happened, they're aware of it. So I do believe that there will be an intent to take a balanced approach, but the digital Nagrik is going to be at the center focus for the government. So the business and its sort of ill effects, some of it unfortunately will have to be taken as an impact as we go along for innovation.
Dr. Joshi, this impact which we have just talked about on businesses and startups, particularly small businesses. So, because you come from the industry and you must be, did you face anything of that sort, or you have any people around who, if we bring in any case from real life, that the regulation has impacted adversely?
So far, there has been a lot of misunderstanding on how we can use this technology in a positive manner. So we had to really make people understand that, that's one side of it where, when people with malicious intent can use it in a different way. But so to make this very clear to all the different stakeholders, and in marketing and entertainment, all these different sectors hold a lot good use cases where this technology can be applied and things can become much more cheaper and accessible and quick in terms of creating content. So just because the regulations were not clear, because if I say that I can create this digital replica, and earlier, because people were not very sure that how this is going to come back at them. For example, when I'm talking to the marketing agencies who are, who have these contracts with these Bollywood celebrities, so they were not sure of using this because of the regulations involved, and we kind of lost certain contracts there. But now I think it's now being openly discussed. Now there are. Ranjana can probably tell more on that, like how the agreements have these clauses in place where due consent is taken on how the digital clones can be created, and there, they can be created, used for a certain time frame and so forth, and these are duly signed by the celebrities. So things have moved past, but yes, initially there was a bit of time when we could not move ahead because of regulations not being cleared.
So if I take you as an example from the industry also, that you are somebody who might get impacted by the new regulation or new rule coming, you feel that the rules today are okay?
I feel the rules are very ambiguous. So they are not clear yet. So, and that's why some people are okay to play with it. Some are still holding back. Once we have a clear rules, probably we can offer the services accordingly. So that's what.
Yeah, Mr. Ricari, do you think that ambiguity could go because most of the rules and laws are open to interpretation?
I honestly, this speed of innovation and the law is always playing catch up, no matter how agile and nimble they want to keep it. So I don't think I think the use cases and the speed at which it's moving is just too quick for whether a commercial agreement or whether the law can keep pace with it. So I think the answer to your question is probably no from my wishful thinking. But at the same time, I feel that it's perhaps better to have a law which is sometimes somewhere in the middle of reactive and proactive from the standpoint of innovation. Jyoti very correctly said that there are some very wonderful use cases which can help in cutting costs, timeliness, and just enhancing user experience, especially the media entertainment industry, like you correctly said. Digital twins is a concept that now has become fairly vocal and is giving new commercialization opportunities to the celebrities as well. So while there is, I think it's a cost of being a celebrity at the end of the day, right? As much as you're out there and there is this whole menace called the deep fake, the fact that a digital replica can be made without expending your time and effort and riding on your popularity, you're able to monetize on that aspect. So there are those benefits as well which exist.
Yeah, I think those benefits are like for celebrities or individuals. But if you talk about the general good, there have been really say if you look at the healthcare,
Right.
definitely the kind of technology which has come in healthcare has helped. Because I know of a few systems where you are sitting in front of a computer, but you feel like you are sitting in front of a doctor. There are some people who have started these services, it will be a kiosk where there is a computer and you in a village and somebody is just sitting over there, like the patient goes into the cubicle and then it's like you are talking to a doctor. So those kind of things are really helpful if you think in terms of technology. I don't deny. And what you are saying, definitely the technology has helped in terms of replicas and all, and it held much long back. If I look at the political campaigns, the 2014 campaign, those 3D hologram images were largely used all across the country, and they still use it at times. So definitely at that point it is there. But then comes again the question of deep fakes, as we say, or maybe misuse of technology. I just want to both of you to give me your views on the Rashmika Mandana case. How do you see it as a success? Definitely it's a misuse of technology, but law has kind of made its way. How do you see that?
I mean, I think there's always a turning point to something. And it's not that deepfakes haven't been around for a while. We've had these instances where even in the 2020 elections, there was one political party's leader whose deepfake video was created about saying a lot of malicious things about the other opposition party leaders. It's not like deepfakes hasn't been around for a while. But it's true, and as India operates, that when the celebrities speak, everyone sit up and take notice. It also sort of made people aware, especially in the context of women, how this technology could be perhaps way more detrimental in a very tsunamic way than anything else that's been around for a long time. And a person and a woman's body and image can very easily be violated on this digital media. I think what that case did was really sensitize the government, brought in a lot of celebrities to speak in favor of doing something about the law. And I'm not going to comment on whether a lot of the voices which spoke were aware of whether some parts of the law already took care of this or not, but it started a movement, right? For the government to sit up, take notice to say what we have, is it sufficient or not? Right after this, METI very proactively worked with NASCOM and other stakeholders and sat with the social media intermediaries to see what could they really do. What channelized this? It was those cases and those voices that happened. So certainly, I think it has had a very significant impact of taking the conversation to a more proactive level. Hopefully, in this December meeting that has been announced, we will see something more constructive put together. And I hope it doesn't die a sudden death. Having said that, it is anybody's, crystal ball gazing on how soon or late the laws will come in. But at least a reaction has been very well intended by the government.
Yeah, I can't agree more with Ranjana here that this was a turning point where, given that deepfakes have been around since long, but they haven't been taken seriously. And this comes from a very personal experience when I launched this company back in 2021. And I kind of, showcasing it to different sectors. And I'll actually touch upon other threats that we haven't really talked about where deepfakes are causing, can cause problem, probably are causing problems under the blanket. And that is BFSI sector or anywhere where biometric verification is, because current biometric verification is highly vulnerable to attacks. Because if it passes, like a deepfake image or a video is given as an input, and if it doesn't check for if it's a deepfake or not, it's going to just look at the identity and probably pass it as a real identity. And that's what the problem is. And when I sort of went out in the market back in 2021, people kind of took it as a great tool, like this is good technology, but why do we need it? It's not needed. Or we'll see, maybe it's a technology for future, 5 years down the line, we'll see if we would want to use it. And I'm talking about leading commercial banks here in India, who I could showcase that how vulnerable their KYC systems were. And now, fast forward to now, everybody is now looking for this technology. So that's where I personally feel that this has made everyone kind of, wake out of some slumber and kind of do something for it, so that we know that this threat is not a threat, but is real danger. And we should have certain rules in place to protect ourselves.
If I can just add, a couple of lines to this. We've spoken so extensively about celebrities, women. I know we haven't touched about the impact it could have to children, especially given the amount of content as parents we put for our children on social media. And I note what Jyoti said before, machine learning is something, the more content out there, the better the deepfake could be, and the amount of children content we're putting. Keeping all that aside, I mean, and also, we've spoken about situations in politics, how it could have just moved the opinion poll altogether. But it could also significantly have such deep impacts on, let's say, the securities market. A deepfake video with disinformation being spread can catapult the entire economy of the day. Should you have a deepfake video of any of the key industrialists out there, or of a company which is, one of the blue chip companies? So I think while it was a celebrity's video, it was more to do with one of those misuses out there. It really is a cascading effect. And when the government's approaching it, I truly hope that they look at this more holistically and not, from the lens of only maybe keeping celebrities and private individuals and personal data intact, but from a much larger lens. And I would truly hope that banning certain technologies, which certain countries and states have done globally, is not the approach that they adopt, because that's where innovation would really stop as such.
Just if I can add as
Yeah,
well, just
please.
one line, just to continue there, what Ranjana had mentioned. So I sort of view it as that initially in computer systems that we are always thinking of something as a software attack or a hardware attack. Deepfakes are perception level attacks, because we are consuming data, basing a perception on what we are viewing. And that's exactly what you said, because we are opening up a lot of content to our children, and they are getting that information from synthetically generated content without being aware that it's synthetically generated or manipulated. So that is how it is playing with our perception. So these are perception level attacks that we should be taking care of.
I think the issue about children, particularly in the kind of media they're consuming, whether it's synthetic or not, and its whole aspect of social and cultural impact is altogether like, we definitely need much more time to discuss that separately, and we would do in maybe another week or so, or coming weeks. I want both of you to kind of, comment on two particular things. Like if you compare the law which is there in India today, Do you think, is it kind of, comparable, it is good or bad in terms of, if you look at the law in EU and law in maybe US particularly? Like, how do you see the law around not just deepfakes, but, overall the emerging technologies and its impact on society? How do you see it? Both of you, one by one.
I mean, since you make it like a wider ambit of just emerging technologies and disruptive businesses as such, I mean, I think it's a given that a lot of the markets and industries for which these laws would be relevant by maybe on a different level of maturity, and at least let's say the US market. I think before the Data Protection Act was put in place in August, I would have said that the country is seriously lacking in terms of where it ought to be in terms of protecting a lot of the personal information. But having now seen what the government intends to put in place, I think while GDPR is the gold standard, their businesses are on a different level of maturity. I think what the government does realize is that startups need certain impetus to innovate and to scale up their businesses, which is why I won't call the word relaxations, but certain principles have been put in place in the law as well, which I feel is more in tune with the requirements of what India's economy requires. So to your point of how progressive the laws are, I feel for a developing country and a country where technology probably is so fast paced in terms of its evolution, Mate is doing a very good job in absorbing and reacting to the need of the times. And the data protection law is a great example of it. Still, like Jyoti put it earlier today, we'll play catch up in certain departments, and this will be iterative. Having said that, I think countries like UK, EU, and US to some extent as well have taken other issues more proactively, like, for example, artificial intelligence. The government's still contemplating bringing in something in, say, the Digital India Act. But we've already seen the misuse case of deepfakes, right, to some extent. While some other peripheral laws take care of things, it's not a balance. If you're relying on the IPC or the IT Act, which are criminal in nature, you need to have a balance. Certainly, we are lagging in some of those departments. And EU and UK in particular are fairly more progressive in how they have approached this. I'm going to take a pause over here and hand it to you, Jyoti, for your reactions.
No, I think you've more or less covered the differentiation that Manish had asked on. And after this PDPA Act had come in place, yes, we were sort of fairly weak, but now things are really moving up in terms of having new laws and new policies, new regulations, and also the proactive measure that government is taking with the recent meeting that has happened, and now what's coming up in December. I'm really hopeful that do that catch-up game, just do.
I want to add one thing, Manishji, which is actually bang on to what you want to know about how progressive India is. When the consultations for the Digital India Act was announced, and the Honorably Minister of State, Rajiv Ji, gave the fundamental principles on which it will be based, I was very happy to see that he wants to take a risk-based approach, probably even move away from, how they want to regulate platform versus content, because every business today is so multifaceted. It's no, it might be a OTT platform, but at the same time, it is giving you e-commerce as well. I think the fact that they want to evolve the Digital India Act bases certain principles and themes of cybersecurity and protection of the consumer is going to be the center of it. The fact that the government recognizes this, I am anticipating a very evolved law. Some parts of it we're already seeing, like, for example, just today, for example, Consumer Protection Act has also brought in specific rules with respect to sorry, I'm forgetting not deepfakes, dark patterns, for example. Again, a very evolved way of looking at where technology is taking things. But while you see certain things being implemented, I believe the Digital India Act, which the new government's going to take charge of, is going to be way more evolved and in touch and in tune with what today's innovation requires.
So thank you so much for such an insightful discussion that we had today. So one question that I have is that it's not just about the deepfake technology that we are talking about. It is also about the social media platforms, like how much they can be trusted upon. So one case that I remember is the rules on which they were asked to file a compliance report, sorry, publish a compliance report, monthly compliance report. So there is no uniform standard where they can publish that report that yes, we got this many complaints and we responded to this many complaints. So each platforms does this according to their own will. So I just wanted to know that do you believe that social media platforms are doing enough to counter the spread of deepfakes or synthetic media? And if not, then what are the responsibilities do they bear in curbing the impact of synthetic media? Because I doubt whether we can trust social media platform for this or not.
No, that's a very, very good question. And see, content is king, and social media want more and more content. So,
Yes.
as long as there are no hard regulations out there, they probably won't take it on themselves to see, what's going out there and what's not. And see, think of it as how YouTube has copyright infringement check. Whenever you upload any media, it checks for if it is, any copyrighted material, and if it violates that, it won't let you upload it. Something similar has to be done. Now that happens because you can't infringe the copyrights. So YouTube has taken that measure. So something similar when comes in place, I'm sure social media platforms would be much more active. It's not that they can't do, they're not made to do yet, so it's not happening. But certainly they have all the abilities, and a lot can happen at the very initial stage.
So I'll give my 2 bits to this because your question is probably what every digital Nagrik is probably got on their mind. And because I represent, a fair share of maybe social media companies, I understand their legal mindset too. So Jyoti is absolutely right in saying the laws are not very prescriptive. And I don't really think the laws will ever be prescriptive. It's not meant to be prescriptive because the moment you go down that route, you will kill innovation. She's right in saying content is king. There's this beautiful concept called safe harbor under our law, which is also very, very important for keeping the business models intact for these businesses to thrive on, because you're trying to strike a balance at the end of the day. Let me tell you something which is very unique to India, I believe in many ways possible. And that is this concept called self regulation and the culture of trying to self certify, self regulate, not just by social media intermediaries, but whether it's the broadcasters, it's the OTT platforms. It's a culture which is very unique to India. Why? Because they have seen the success stories of it where the judiciary is concerned. So, what a lot of the social media companies do is that they want to have a very bona fide approach. Now, while you may or may not have, as a digital Nagrik, as much confidence in them, and while there may not be a one size fits all approach that everyone takes in terms of reporting, at the heart of it, what a lot of these social media intermediaries do is self regulate and try to imbibe best practices. As an example, what I mentioned earlier today was right after the meeting with NASCOM. A lot of these social media intermediaries, and it was NASCOM and METI and all the social media intermediary stakeholders there, while the law is or the regulations will be put in play, these social media intermediaries has bona fide on their part said that they will, in the interim, internalize certain things to make sure that they could take proactive steps as versus reactive steps. Now, some of them may or may not be evident to the user as it may not be as vocalized or the information may not be disseminated. But truth be said, the Google example is a great example where nothing's been imposed on them. Right? But they have decided to implement some of these best practices from overseas and other laws in their system to say now the user has to disclose whether it is synthetic or not. Maybe the new law is going to bring it in, but this is a proactive step. And I do believe some of these initiatives should begin to give more confidence to the users. But it is sessions like this which will help probably educate the youth and make them more informed about these initiatives.
Let me come to my
Absolutely agree.
last.
Yes.
Let me come to my last question after this, and I think I just want to bring in two things when you say self-regulation. I just want to put it self-regulation versus state regulation. That is fun. And why I'm saying it because after all, uh, running a social media company is a business. So we have seen reports that Insta has been kind of found that a lot of content which goes on Instagram is making the young girls kind of adapting to suicidal tendencies, and these were the internal reports of the Meta. So we definitely can believe that okay, they would be really good to put in whatever they are saying and self-regulating. But would the self-regulation, if it is about profit, it's end of the day, would that self-regulation would be enough, or do we really, as a state, we need an intervention?
If I may probably take that first, I think that's a very good question in terms of how the future regulation should be. So, self regulation is a beginning, I believe, Manishji, but it has to be a risk based approach. I think you always need to map what is the potential harm that technology or that business model could pose to figure whether self regulation is the approach or maybe co regulation is the approach, right? And I think some of these things are iterative. So, for example, when the OTT industry has begun under the 2021 regulation with a self regulatory approach, a lot of the public interest litigations have considerably come down. But at the same time, some still exist. Whether this will be sufficient or not, as we go along, only time will tell. Maybe we'll move to a co regulation model. Who knows? But at the same time, for the instances we're talking about, like Jyoti correctly said, content is king on social media platforms. If there is too much of intervention in a co-regulation model by the government, user confidence would anyways go down. And the exact example you gave, right, in that situation, would we be expecting these social media companies to be, sitting in the place of the parents and, educating the kids on what's good or bad for them? Or do we need to prescribe everything, everything needs to be codified? Some things need to be left in terms of how these things evolve. Else, I believe you're not going to have the kind of innovation that we've seen with just what Meta does today, and the future of another Meta happening in some times to come.
Dr. Jyoti.
Yeah, I think I sort of believe that somehow co-regulation is needed, but certainly can't be that stringent. I mean, it can't be that prescriptive. Um, but probably if we leave it at just self-regulation, that may not be sufficient.
We are probably like, for this discussion, we are at the end of it. I must thank both of you and my colleague Ranjana. Anything you think we can talk more about?
I think Ranjana very briefly mentioned about educating people on deepfakes when we're talking about, how people can be comfortable with consuming this content. And educating specifically on deepfakes could be like, really maybe through the learning and development programs, they can be made aware what are the things that one should be looking at when, deepfake or any sort of video that they are watching and it appears to be something not right, and what could be the things like look at the different eye colors, or I'm talking from a very technical things, but those are the markers that should be known to digital nagrik so that they are aware that okay, if something doesn't sit right, what are the areas I should be focusing on. So I think education part is one thing that should be focused as well.
I think definitely this should be taken up. I completely agree. And like, thank you so much